The crypto ride that we're on together likely about to get crazy. This is the Bitcoin chart, a roadmap. Whether you hold Bitcoin or not, I think is important. If you've ever been on a roller coaster, you're kind of going up this huge hill, getting ready to fall. The roller coaster kind of slows down as it approaches the top. And then we're getting ready for this big fall of velocity to the downside. I think in terms of the Bitcoin charts, in terms of crypto markets, we might be approaching a similar type of vibe right now. And I want to explain in this video why that's not a bad thing. And if we go over here to this daily chart is what we're going to dig into. These yellow circles, these little data points throughout history of Bitcoin, this roadmap that we have in crypto and the importance of it. Right now, what I want to say before we talk about these areas real quick is we're going to start seeing headlines, as we've anticipated, about earnings over the next couple of weeks. What does this do to the markets? This is the underlining question that we should all be asking ourselves. Dow falls to start the week as earnings season rolls on. Goldman shares slide. How is this going to impact markets in the short term? We should be very vigilant. And as that ties into what's going on from a technical analysis perspective on the Bitcoin charts, it becomes very important. One thing before we really dive into these yellow circles and the importance of them on the short and midterm and macro, I want to just talk about something. The move that we're looking for Bitcoin is slowly happening on the macro, this shift from bear to bull. I want to show you what it looks like, though, in a very simple manner on the charts. If we look at the last bear market, Bitcoin falling below the 786 line, our huge ultimate bottom indicator, Bitcoin bottoming out. You see this 20-week moving average. As Bitcoin escapes that 786 line, starting to turn around and cruise to the upside, crossing the 50-day moving average. This is a macro bullish indicator. When I talk about long-term macro confirmations, that's what I'm looking for. That's what I'm waiting for from bear to bull. Same thing happened back here in 2015, bear market low. The 20-week moving average starts making a trend to the upside as Bitcoin's breaking the 786 line, crossing above the 50-week moving average in blue, and we start seeing those higher highs and higher lows. This is a weekly chart. This is zoomed out. We go to the chart right now. We're slowly starting to see that story develop, but we're not there yet. There's no confirmation of this macro bullish shift, but we're starting to get that pivot point in play, and you can see it really playing out on this weekly chart. We have this nice explosive move of Bitcoin above the 786, the yellow line. We have an explosive move above the 20-week moving average, but look at all the work that the bulls still have to do to get this 20-week moving average to start leveling up above the 50-week moving average. Nobody knows what that looks like. It could start happening, right now leading into Q1 or Q2, Q3 of this year, but it's a slow shift. And this is important to paint this context for everything we're about to discuss right here on the daily chart. Now, here we are in the daily. This is why I think in the short term, we should be very ready for volatility, for downside, for probably a lot of fear headlines, because right now the charts are setting up for Bitcoin, for crypto, to kind of see this retracement. And I want to explain why. First, on this daily chart that we're looking at, we've already known that we've kind of broken this Fibonacci retracement. This is a swing high to swing low up to this resistance area. This was a very big, it's obviously short-term, zoomed in daily chart, but this is a very big macro move, because this move, everything that just happened here, how it plays out on this weekly chart, that explosive move through the 20-week moving average is extremely important for this pivot point, this shift in bear to bull. However, now that we've had this explosive move to the upside, we see these all the time for Bitcoin. I think, and this is just the way that I see the charts, I'm just sharing my opinion with you, I think it is time for a retracement. If not to the 200-day moving average, then to these moving averages down here, 20-day, 50-day moving average. We see this time and time again, and I want to note this. I could be completely wrong. I like to just be cautious to the downside. As I sit here and record this video, I want Bitcoin to continue going up. I want to be wrong. I don't want to see a retracement. I just like to be cautious, because those volatile moves to the downside, those are those emotional pivot points that I really think get to people, impact decisions. And why not just anticipate those worst case scenarios of volatility, especially when headlines and the current events that are happening across the macroeconomic landscape could really set that move up, right? So let's look at this from a technical analysis perspective, and we're going to go over here to this chart. Now, the drawback, and let me just paint context for price range wise, to this 200-day moving average, 8% move to the downside, 20-day moving average, a 15% fall for Bitcoin, 50-day moving average, 18% fall for Bitcoin. So 10 to 20% to the downside retracement. That 786 line, a macro area around 18%, and that is a big retracement area. What happens if Bitcoin falls? Remember, for altcoins, this is the roadmap. This is the roadmap for the macro cycles of crypto, in my opinion, and that's why I use this Bitcoin chart. Now here we are on the daily chart from a different perspective. We have some new data points to kind of evaluate here as we're talking about all of these moving parts. I circle these areas because there's something happening on the daily chart that I think is very worth paying attention to. This move on the daily chart is, it's really, if you zoom out, it's a pretty historic move. This is like one of the most overbought areas that the RSI has seen on the daily chart. And this chart is going back. This is a daily chart zoomed out, but right back here, just for context, is 2017. Now, the most overbought times that this has happened, I'm going to explain in a second why this is a little bit different right now, and it's actually kind of bullish on the long term. But in the short term, we should really pay attention to this, because every time we get into this area, what happens? Bitcoin falls. Bitcoin kind of consolidates, retraces. Now, I know we want to see just kind of this bullish continuation. Markets just are man, we put in that bottom, we're just going to moon to the upside, 300% gains. Obviously, if you're a crypto holder, you probably want to see that. We would all enjoy that. But if we just put that emotion aside and what we want to see in the markets, what does data say? Historically, when Bitcoin gets overbought like this, what happens? There's a retracement. So if we look at these yellow times, so just for context here, this was February 2021, right? So we kind of open up both charts and we look at, all right, well, February 2021, what was happening? The bull market wasn't over, right? You can see Bitcoin up there. But if we look at what happened before the continuation of the bull market, what happened? There was when it hit that area, a huge retracement. We're looking at 30% dip for Bitcoin before continuing to the upside. At the time, that wasn't a bad thing. It was kind of a necessary good thing to start seeing new all-time highs once again, which Bitcoin went on to do. Now we start going back to these other areas, right? Bitcoin kind of getting into overbought area. Here's kind of one a little bit more reminiscent to where we are right now. It's shortly after Bitcoin exited the bear market. You can see Bitcoin getting overbought. It consolidates before continuation to the upside, and you can see that happening. Here's another time Bitcoin was so overbought on the daily. This was the top of the bull market back in 2017. Either way, every time Bitcoin has retraced a little bit. Even back here, small retracement. You can see back here just above the 20-day moving average. This is probably, out of all the ones that I circled, the smallest retracement, around a 13, 14% retracement for Bitcoin when it got to this overbought level that you see there on that chart. Now, one thing that I take from all of this data, and it's just putting aside just the way that markets feel, the way that crypto Twitter is going crazy and is feeling bullish and the bottom is in, the one thing I take away from this is just the fact that every time Bitcoin has reached this area on this RSI, the slower moving momentum oscillator, it has retraced. That's all. And that's meaningful to me, because historically, when we have such consistency in these markets, we should start getting cautious and say, there's no guarantee that's going to happen again, but let's anticipate at the very least there is a healthy retracement. And again, healthy retracement, 200-day moving average retest. Down here, the 20-day, the 50-day, all of this momentum move, the 20-day above the 50-day moving average down here, this is a very good move. It could turn out to be a brilliant looking pivot point for the bottom of this bear market, but we have to test these areas one way or another. Maybe Bitcoin pumps another 10, 20% to the upside, and then it does it. But one way or another, we're getting to this area, this point where I think Bitcoin has to and will test those areas. If we go over here back to the daily chart with our Fibonacci placement, you can just see what it might look like if Bitcoin falls. I think at the end of the day, when we go to the weekly chart, though, here's where things get bullish. On the macro, I mentioned that this chart where we're looking at this overbought areas, there's a macro bullish play here. This is why. If you go over here to the weekly chart, look where Bitcoin is on the weekly slower moving momentum oscillator, this RSI. it is not overbought. It still has so much room for upside. We've just broken this big downtrend of lower highs on the RSI. There's a momentum shift happening. Bitcoin sitting just in the middle range of the RSI, a ton of room for upside. Obviously, some consolidation. Maybe we put in a higher low and then continue to the upside. But this is a really nice looking pivot point for macro cycles, the shift from bear to bull. The reason I'm bringing that up is because you start looking at these areas where Bitcoin was getting overbought on this chart that we were just looking at. Check this out. Bitcoin was at a different place on the weekly than it is now. So for instance, here's this January, February overbought area, probably more January overbought area, right, for Bitcoin. And you can see it. There it is before that drawback. What was happening on this RSI back here in January, February? Right here. This is where it was. Check it out. Bitcoin very overbought. This could be a very macro concern, a very big macro concern. Right now, Bitcoin's not there, right? You start going back and we start looking at, okay, how about back here? You know, I think that other one was May 2019 when we got that overbought area on the daily. Check it out. Overbought on the RSI. Overbought here, the bull market. So all of these areas on this chart where Bitcoin is overbought, Bitcoin kind of being overbought here on the weekly as well. And if you look at it now, not overbought. This, for me, screams, and this is multi-layered technical analysis, I would say, this screams pivot point for bottom of a bear market. Now, this could be multi-month, but it screams pivot point. Lastly, if we go back here and we can even just look at May 2017, we got this overbought area on Bitcoin. We can say, okay, what was Bitcoin doing in May of 2017 on the weekly? So you go to the weekly, May 2017, and we are right around here. So check it out. May 2017, Bitcoin overbought. So even then, so Bitcoin hanging out in this overbought range every time except for now. So this is very bullish on the macro for me, but I can't stress this enough. On the short term, I'm just being cautious. And again, I could be wrong. Bitcoin could just keep going. Another 100% gains for Bitcoin, right? But I'm just being cautious, and I like to just stick to the technical analysis personally because I like to put that emotion aside as we evaluate the bottom range of this crypto. Bear to bull market. Focus on the data, not emotions. And for me, that's the best that I can do. And I'm just sharing that view with you, sharing my crypto journey with you. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Hit that like, hit that subscribe. I really appreciate each and every one of you. I'll see you in the next video. God bless.